Good evening. It is a pleasure. I'm Bob Brown, and this is Ken Scholes, and welcome to the premiere episode of B Cube Sunday Evening, or better known as B Cube Reads, where we are inviting some of the, we have some fantastic authors at B Cube Press, known here. You'll see Ken Scholes, also a noted musician, and has what's tell us a little bit about your what people can expect to find out about you when they look you up and what they should look up.
Oh my goodness! Well, I've had kind of a hell of a ride. I started life out in a traumatic little rural town where I wanted to be a science fiction writer until I decided instead to become a Southern Baptist preacher and bigot. And I did that for a little bit until I had a I had a round of cognitive dissonance that sent me into therapy instead of seminary, and kind of course corrected. And then along the way, I started making friends with people like John Pitts and Manny Frischberg, and ultimately you. I cut my teeth as a young writer over at Radcon, where you were plugging us into programming over there, and did some of my earliest readings over there at Radcon, scheduled by you. So when you asked me to write this story, I thought, this is a good idea.
And it's a good story. So, since it's a good story and it will go for a while, um, why don't you tell us a bit about what we're going to hear, and then I'm going to disappear, and you can start reading.
Sure. Well, when you pitched, one of my favorite things in my career is when editors pitch me and say, "Hey, I want a story." And you came to me with this, and you had the instant sale on this because you told me that you had a story from John, you had a story from Manny, that they were my first two writing friends. We've never been in anything together. And you said, if you'd write a story too, you'd all be in the same book together. And this was right after John passed. So this was a really important one. And in thinking about the story, I really wanted to dig deep. This was for the Space Force anthology. And I had some pretty strong feelings as an ex-preacher, as an ex-Southern Baptist, as an ex-member of the GOP. I had some super strong feelings about the fuckery that's been going on. And this was during the first administration. And now we're, into the second one. And I think this story is even more relevant. I also was I set up the solar system in this world to be tip of the hat to Edgar Rice Burroughs. So you have inhabitable planets and moons within our solar system and other intelligent species, like Barsoom in the Burroughs books. So that's where this kind of started for. The story fell onto my head Valentine's Day 2020 on a trail. I went out in the woods looking for a story, and this found me while I was out there, and I came home and wrote it straight away and sent it to you.
And it was an excellent story. You
Thank
flummoxed my other editor. Basically, her response was, "Bob, this is good, but what do we do with it?" And I'd like to say that my immediate response was, "We publish it. Damn it."
I'm glad you did.
And I am glad we did, because it is seldom that you can actually have something so excellent appearing in a small press volume. So that said, I want to let the the reading begin with. Don't forget the book was the Space Force, Tales from the Space Force and Beyond, and the name of your story was
Better Dreams Than These.
Better Dreams Than These. Now, did you reprint this somewhere else too, right?
Yep. It's in my short story collections. It's one of the title stories. Better Dreams, Fallen Seeds, and Other Handfuls of Hope. So it became one of the title stories in my newest collection that dropped at WorldCon this last year.
And I'm just going to be blunt. The best Ken Scholes story I have, and I'll tell it, make it quick, is you were delayed at NorwestCon. Jen came up and asked me if I could read your story. And I said, okay. And I don't know how I got it, but I got one of your big flannel shirts and I read your story. And reading a story cold is hard. But your story was so well written, the timing so good, the words so clear. Ray Bradbury would have sent you a thank you note for demonstrating the craft, I think. And but it was of no problem to read. It was that good. And
Do you remember
so
what story that was? That was a long time ago. That was when the babies were tiny. I stayed home with them.
it was the hands. I remember hands and counting fingers somehow.
Huh.
Uh,
Okay.
I just can't remember. I just remembered
Okay.
it in my mind. Jen may remember.
Well,
Uh,
let's see.
but now I'm going to go away and let you read.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Bob. Here I am. Better Dreams Than These by Ken Scholes. Some nights he dreamed about the green jungles of Venus. Some nights he dreamed about rum. But on the last night, before the last writing room kickoff of the last season of his illustrious dual track career as a reality television star and a commissioned officer in the U.S. Space Force, Admiral Fleetwood Mackenzie Stewart dreamed about his arch nemesis and one time best friend, and it startled him awake. He mumbled the drone flies away and lay in their receding glow, trying to conjure up what he could remember of the dream. They'd been in the command room of the USS Pence, and both were captains, yet it seemed set before Lieutenant J.G. Scott had gone rogue in the sixth season reboot. There'd been a kiss, fierce and unexpected, and then Scott had leaped onto the captain's narrow desk, hips gyrating as he cried out, "Oh, Captain, my Captain!" And Stewart had lunged forward, hands fumbling with the large, shiny buckle on his captain's sword belt, and woke suddenly. Now, in the dark, Stewart became aware of just how awake parts of him were, and he slowly released his breath. Then he whispered on the light, rolled over, and pulled the tattered contraband copy of the Blue Book that made his life sane from its hidden compartment in his nightstand. He thumbed through it for an hour, sometimes reading, sometimes just feeling the paper beneath his fingers. And in the end, he climbed naked from his bed and went to stand before the flat metal vid screen that took up one wall of his quarters. USS Pence, Season 1, he told it, Episode 7. They are deep in creating Season 2 of USS Pence when Boggs and Biggs have him on their show for the Season 1 recap of the surprise hit. So, Boggs says, Season 1, Episode 7, Biggs says, because part of their shtick is finishing one another's sentences. You meet Jackson Scott for the first time when you take the USS Pence to Venus in search of his father, Professor Angus Scott's lost ship. It was quite a first encounter, Boggs says. Let's look at it again. And everyone does. The drones are bigger and clumsier back in the early days, but multiple screens swim to life. In one screen, the green-skinned Venusian apes surge across the jungle canopy, barely perceptible as individual creatures. In their midst, something small and pink flies from vine to vine with the rest of the pack. One screen fills up with that form, naked and flowing and alive. Another screen fills with Captain Fleetwood Mackenzie Stewart's face. The look on it is illegal, especially in the Space Force. Now that, says Biggs, is same-sex attraction, finishes Boggs. Both make siren sounds. Whoop, whoop. Better call the chaplain, Boggs says. Codename DADT, Biggs says. Do indeed ask, Boggs says. Do indeed tell, Biggs finishes. They both in unison. Do tell, Captain Stewart. Back in those days, lying to himself about anything had been easy because of the rum. But with the rum's help, even staring at it in episode 7, he couldn't see what Biggs and Boggs saw. Captain Stewart laughs after an awkward pause. Nothing to tell, he says. What he's doing requires admirable strength and skill. I'm sure, they both say. Ironic that Biggs and Boggs would be ruined within a year, disgraced and discredited by their own illegal relationship, despite being civilians and despite their show being among the new Stars and Stripes best-rated programs. Watching the episode did nothing to wash away the dream, but it did its intended trick to pull him into more episodes, then more talk shows about the episodes. It had been surprising how episode 7 had changed the ship and the show and his career so fundamentally by bringing in Scott. Jackson Scott had been an instant spike in ratings, as well as a useful member of the crew. Sole survivor of a family lost in space, found the savage jungles of Venus, adopted by her four-armed sentient apes. Until then, Captain Fleetwood Mackenzie Stewart had been the shiny new thing, out in the shiniest, newest ship, now credited with finally solving the mystery of the missing Scott family on their doomed test run for the Wagner Scott engine. Still, sharing the spotlight was easy with Scott. By season 2, when they found the drone footage of his childhood raised among the Venusian apes, it had taken Scott to unexpected heights of popularity, so fresh from a primitive life lost on Venus. 15 years his senior, Stewart took on the role of captain and older brother to the young man as he slowly reclaimed his lost humanity. By sunrise, Stewart still hadn't slept, but he'd wiped 100 tears from his eyes. Finally, he slipped into his Space Force jogging sweats and sneakers, letting himself out into the red Martian morning. At 70, he'd had enough work done to still feel 50, but he'd never let himself slow down too much, especially once he'd found sobriety. He paused to stretch at the gate of the officers' quarters and glanced up at the sound of a captain's yacht lifting up to return to the orbital docks above. Then he fell into an easy run that took him past the training grounds to a gate that would turn him loose on the running trail along McConnell Canal. He chose it for its view and for its distance from the port. When he hit his first mile, Stewart thumbed the button on the scrambler in his pocket and watched the drone flies scatter and drop. He'd have 15 minutes of privacy, maybe more. Drawing in a lungful of dry air that smelled faintly of cinnamon and cucumber, he initiated the complex series of protocols that would let him call his sponsor. "Hey, Sam," he said, slowing. Beside him, the water moved even slower. "Hey, Ralph," his sponsor said, voice muffled by the program to keep things anonymous. Anonymity had always been important, but being illegal added another layer to it all. "How are you holding up?" Stewart laughed. "Well, I'm calling my sponsor." Sam, not his real name, obviously, chuckled. "It's been a while." Stewart nodded. It was a ridiculous act, given that no one was watching. "I'm still muddling my way along. 11 years sober now." He looked for his next words. "But I'm going through some big changes. Retirement is coming soon, and I'm dreaming about..." He paused. Fearless moral inventory or not, he wasn't sure how much he wanted to share. "I'm dreaming about former coworkers. No, not rigorously honest. I'm dreaming about someone from my work, someone I've known my entire career. It's uncomfortable." "And how's it impacting your sobriety?" He didn't touch the dream, and that didn't surprise him. But what he said next did. "Actually, I haven't thought about drinking. I woke up, skimmed the book, then did a bit of reminiscing, decided to go for a jog and give you a call." "So you're doing your self-care. That's fantastic." He could hear the pride in the man's voice. "Any chance this is a stepping stone? Maybe an 8 through 10 kind of situation?" Stewart hadn't considered that possibility. The raw sexuality of the dream had distracted him from digging too deep, but there had been reasons their friendship had soured. No, he knew, just one reason. He closed his eyes against the shame he felt and forced himself to look away. He swallowed before speaking. "You know, it could be. We had a falling out." His sponsor had probably watched it unfold on the edge of his seat like most of the civilized solar system. It had been an epic falling out that had dominated the 6th season, finally closing when Scott burned his uniform, painted himself green, and stole the Pence B, only to fly it into the sun in an act of defiance. "I know I tried to make amends a long time ago without success." "Well, you know how it goes," Sam said. "Sometimes it's the wrong time. Sometimes there never is a right time, and it becomes something we have to accept with serenity instead of something we change with courage. It's been a long time. Maybe I should try again." The knot in his stomach turned again to tell him he was onto something, and Stewart chuckled. "Stepping stone. Maybe so. Thanks, Sam." "You're welcome, Ralph. Whatever's going on, you and your HP already have it covered." Stewart hesitated, wanting to believe that. His higher power was an out-of-print comic book character from his childhood, the Night Marauder, that he paid lip service to for the program. But deep down, he'd already figured out he was his own higher power, no capitalization necessary, and that the series of projections and transferences that served others so well hadn't worked as well for him. "I think we do," he finally said. "Then keep doing what you're doing, Ralph." "Thanks, Sam." "No problem. You know how to reach me anytime. And hey, Congratulations on retirement. Another ship lifted behind him just as his alarm went off, chiming softly in his ear, letting him know that he had a ship to catch himself soon. I still have he cut himself off and changed the words, year. I have a year to go. Big plans after? The question caught him off guard, but the chiming persisted. And now a name flashed against the inside of his left eye. Not the alarm, he realized, but his agent, who had maybe called 3 times in 30 years. I've not thought about it yet, he said, but I've got another call coming through that I have to take. He moved to the other call and heard Axum Latterday's Texas drawl fill up his ear. Howdy, Mac. You sitting down? We need to talk, son. And after finding the closest bench, the ever-punctual Admiral Fleetwood Mackenzie Stewart missed his shuttle and then sat, shaking his head after finishing that unexpected call. Drone flies twinkle in and out of the scene as the shuttle crew disembarks upon the lush Venusian soil. Stewart's face is brought in close as he barks orders. Crewmen with weapons drawn fan out as dozens of tiny cameras zoom in on his eyes as he scans the jungle. Fewer follow the crew, but that's contractually obligated. His slick new agent at work. Other drone flies race the jungle, released into the air by the shuttle as it landed. The greenery slaps by in a blur until soft chanting and the rustle of wind slows the camera down. The stream of green apes is moving slowly now as the drone rises over them. The pink human in their midst moves with them despite having only 2 arms and no tail. And unlike the apes, he notices the drone. He watches it with arched eyebrows and hoots at it as he leaps from vine to vine. Back at the shuttle, Captain Stewart draws his flare gun and points it at the sky. He pulls a trigger, and the air above explodes in red, white, and blue, a dazzling fireworks array designed to invoke a patriotic fervor in the audience, instill awe in the natives, and jazz up the traditional flag planting ceremony and prayer of thanksgiving yet to come. The camera switches to the wonderment upon Jackson Scott's face as he sees the fireworks display. He looks to the pack as it steers away, then looks back to the sky. For a moment, both faces are framed in that red, white, and blue light, each looking up and out. Then Scott breaks away from the pack and moves off in the direction of the light and the plane where the shuttle and its crew watch and wait. He's coming toward us, Captain, one of the drone operator's radios, and Stewart approaches the tree line. When Scott drops to the ground, lithe and naked, Stewart steps back and snaps to an ensign on his left. Of course, in the feed, everything's blurred, and the look on the captain's face makes for great comedy. Your shirt, man, he says to the ensign. Give me your shirt. Stewart pauses while the sweaty, muscular man scrambles out of the snug shirt, then takes it and wraps it around his waist before extending it to Scott. When Scott takes it, laughs, and draws it close to wrap it around Stewart's waist again, there's, of course, more comedic opportunity. And if that portion of the episode had made it past censors, it's possible that Biggs and Boggs would have found episode 8 just as telling as 7. Freshly shaved and in his dress blues, Stewart rode the shuttle in silence and pondered Axum Latterday's call. Scott wants a meeting, his agent had told him. Just you, just an hour. The studio and the force both love it for different reasons. The Underwriters Union hates it and will go along, like always, with the necessary rate increases. But I told him it didn't matter. I knew Fleetwood Mac, and after all this time, there was no way in Hades that... I'll do it, Stewart heard himself say. And just like that, he would have his moment, if there were any amends he could still try to make after all these years. He'd certainly made his lists, men and women he'd harmed along the way, drunk or sober, and he'd made things right wherever and whenever he could. Jackson Scott was, in his mind, the greatest loose end in his fierce moral inventory. And this could be my last chance. Even as he thought it, Stewart glanced out the window at the sky slipping from red to black. Soon, they'd dock with whatever big surprise they had waiting to kick off the storyboarding for the last season, or at least as close as they could get it between all the parties involved. And then, after a few weeks of hammering things out, he'd face his last year of work and any last chance he expected he might have of seeing Jackson Scott again. That was an easy launch pad into thinking about next year and the changes it would bring to his life. Despite the question coming up frequently as retirement drew near, he found himself more curious about Scott's future than his own. He'd gone rogue from the force, destroyed the vessel that had liberated him, stolen a new ship, and declared himself a polytheistic, agnostic, pansexual pirate at war with the civilized solar system 30 years ago in a negotiated settlement with United System Broadcasting and the U.S. government. And 10 years ago, he'd stopped participating in the writing room, having his input, yays and nays, sent up through his own agent. Was he also being written out? He couldn't imagine the man retiring, though he'd seen the lavish pleasure dome he'd established with his vast fortune on Planet 10. There had been a special spin-off show where reporters had been cryoed in and allowed to see what Jackson Scott had done with his small private planet at the edge of the system. The man had inherited a fortune once he was established as the Wagner Scott family heir, with a long line of patents for the engine and a dozen other inventions used to move humans further into their dominion. And then he'd added to that fortune, first with his entertainment and federal service contracts, and then later with the lucrative bonus that piracy offered. His one-time friend had done very well for himself, despite a difficult origin story and some betrayal. An odd part of Stewart found himself hoping that Scott had happiness on top of it all. He seemed to in the handful of clips he'd seen, and the handful of encounters they'd had as the writers kept their game of back and forth cat and mouse going across the solar system season after season, dashing and even debonair in a festival of rainbow-colored silks and an old-fashioned rapier. He'd stayed so fit that in the 25th season special of his own show, he'd gone swinging, appropriately clothed, the vines of Venus once again, though the absence of the green apes was noticeable. Excuse me, and politically exploited to little gain by an opposition party that largely now only existed for dramatic effect and white noise. Maybe, he thought, I'll buy a cabin on Phobos and hire some washed-out science fiction author to ghostwrite my memoir. He chuckled at the simplicity of his first retirement fantasy, and then closed his eyes as the cabin lights dimmed for docking. It's the first sanctioned visit to Scott's Pleasure Dome on Planet 10, and Rosella and Rumbello Detweiler, the Face World influencing twins, with their show On the Edge of the Edge, won the pitched media contest for who would land the exclusive interview with the pirate of Planet 10. The three of them floated anti-grav hammocks as the drones positioned themselves. Automatic tables drift between them, robotic arms replenishing fruity, umbrella-bearing drinks that are no doubt heavily spiked with rum and sildenafil. Scott wears as little as possible. The twins are not far behind, but have prosecution considerations back home despite the waivers provided by the union in studio. Rumbello twists in his hammock and sips. So after all these years, you've opened your home to the media. Why now? He's in his 60s, but the only tell is the streak of white in his hair that follows the scar from season 6. He smiles, twists in his hammock so he's facing Rumbello. Well, I realized it can't go on like this forever. At some point, the studio will move on, the Space Force will move on. I might even run out of things I want to steal. So I thought maybe it was time to show the worlds I'm not as diabolical as Stewart and his yes boys in the Force make me out to be. Rosella takes her turn, and when she twists, she shows cleavage and grins. So you've lured my twin and me here and served us spiked drinks using this story as bait? He shrugs. It's in release form as part of the pirate experience. He spins a dial on a remote in his hands, and all their hammocks begin to rise above the palace and the garden, its forests, hills, and plains stretching out around them. As you can see, when I'm not gallivanting around the solar system, I'm here with my people in the home I've made for us. The drones now move about as he continues, capturing the fields, the flowers, the rainbow-clad citizens of his world, pulled together from both his human followers and the sentient subspecies that had joined humanity's labor force as the solar system unfolded the vast richness of the Creator's intelligent design. The drones race out to show some of the structures carefully deconstructed and rebuilt here within that vast pleasure dome. The Plutonian ice lemur's white frosty temple to Ga Mel-Ta stands next to the Venusian's living altar to the vine spider Tolva and her ape lover Vlam, both rising blasphemous in the bright morning sun and promising illegal acts dressed as deeds of righteousness and gifts of offering. The other two temples were less titillating for the guests. No one was excited about the small portico to the Neptunian sea dragon Splah, an invisible quantumly tiny deity that enhanced fishing prowess when besieged, represented by a small crystal glass of water. Or Janu, the forgotten god of underground Mars, which was an afterthought since the Martians had been whispering ghosts for eons before the Space Force put its awkward boots upon the planet's harsh surface. None of them had immigrated to Scott's planet, and no one knew what they believed, but they were included in his pantheon. Scott continues as the drones move on. I've created a place here for those who don't fit the status quo. Renegades and pirates, artists and scientists, lovers and dreamers, atheists and sexual deviants who can't be themselves and live under the flag of the revived United States and her federated worlds. Now, the drones are showing forests, jungles, fields of snow, humans. He pauses. His eyes darken, then clear, and a drone picks up on it. Not just humans. That's too small-minded a notion. People. His eyes soften. It's noticeable. People here get to be who they are, with their needs met as best as I can meet them, just because we're people. Now the camera is back to Rumbello. It's clear he's smitten with the pirate and that the rum is working. His face flushes. So is this a hint for next season? Do we see an end coming to this saga? Will you and Stuart finally bury the hatchet? Scott winks. One day, I'll wager. He spins the dial again, and their hammocks draw close together. But next season, no spoilers here. We've not heard from the creative team yet. Rosella splashes red onto her shirt. Her eyes are wide. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So, Rumbello asks, what would come next? What would retirement look like for a famous, fabulously wealthy, and wildly flamboyant space pirate? Now they're both within reach, and Scott puts his drink down so that he can goose them each from beneath the hammock. And it's as if the studio knows what he's planning. The drones follow his hands and catch the moment, and their mock shock, open-mouthed faces as it happens. Maybe, if I ever do retire, the two of you will have to visit me here and help me come up with things to do. Laughter. Maybe we should start a list. He hits his dial again. More giggling and gasps as the drone flies go black and fall. When the interview resumes, it's obvious that some time has passed. Faces are clean and sober, clothes have been changed, and they sit differently now, in a relaxed posture that says everything the censors can do nothing about. No one is surprised when the Detweiler twins go dark and disappear 2 years later. Celebrity gossip points to Planet 10, but UBS has no comment on the matter. Stuart felt a quiet anxiety coiling in his stomach as he exited the shuttle. Each year, the creative team chose a new venue for the kickoff, and lately, they'd taken to surprising him, even as he got closer to wrapping his time in the Force. Each season was a bigger party that he spent most of sipping ginger ale, flattened to look like scotch. Admiral on deck, the officer of the watch shouted, and a formation of men shifted to attention. A landing bay flooded with bright lights, buzzing drone flies, a red, white, and blue of uniforms beneath banners and flags, lined up behind a row of familiar faces, waiting to shake his hand or salute him. Welcome to the Pence D, Vice Admiral Duggan said as he returned Stuart's salute. She's a beauty, and the improvements to the Wagner Scott engine will make her the first of the fleet to take the God-given miracle of America confidently beyond our own solar system. They shook hands and he looked around. Thank you, Admiral. She is indeed a beauty. The ship even smelled new, and it brought back memories of his first day on the B, his first command, and his first day on the C. Shortly after Scott had destroyed the ship they'd sailed together those 5 seasons they were friends. Stuart moved down the line. Ready for a grand slam finale of a run? The executive producer, Jonathan Malachi Todd, was next. I think you'll love the initial ideas on the table. Stuart nodded, shook the hand. I'm looking forward to it, he said. Then the commander of the new Pence, his former executive officer, Jeremiah Stone. Mac, it's good to see you. They saluted, then embraced. Stone was the only one of his crew who knew he was in the program. Stone was the only one of his crew who'd had the balls to call him on his shit when he was rock bottoming, and it had fostered an intimacy absent from Stuart's other friendships. You too, Jerry. How's Marge? She's good. Sends her best. Once the dust settles. Stuart nodded, continued down the line. New cast members he'd never met, old ones coming back, special guest stars coming in from other ships and other shows. Finally, they were through the first of the ceremonial nonsense and shuffled off to a large board table set up in the observation deck beneath a holographic map of the solar system. A crisply uniformed staff of green apes spirited platters and pitchers and plates around the room, their forearms a blur of precise motion. After introductions and a brief prayer offered by the ship's new chaplain, monitoring quietly from his corner away from the table, the work began. I'll pause and have a quick drink here. So last season, we focused on slowing Stewart down and speeding Stone up. The head writer, Susan Shamrock Jones, one of the 7 female writers employed by the force, and the only head writer among her gender. Getting the old wolf ready to retire, coping with leaving command, and facing a possibility that he may never resolve the Scott situation, despite a brilliant career. Stewart picked up the e-tablet before him. The agenda glared up at him with menacing font. Of course, we don't want you slowed down too much. So, just like last season, you'll spend a considerable amount of this season in space, facing Scott from the captain's chair. She looked to Stone. And we have some big plans for you, of course. We're going to wrap up the pirate thread, at least as far as the Pence goes, with Stewart's departure. Then the room grew quiet as the map overhead grew. So that with this season finale, we take the Pence out of the system for a 5-season run under Stone's command. Weird new worlds, bizarre new aliens, and such. She clapped and everyone joined her. Now, let's talk about what that might look like between now and then. From there, it was voice after voice, effusive in praise, especially for the older crew castmates. Some of the younger writers had cut their teeth watching the show as children, and it showed in their eyes and words. Finally, after 4 hours, they moved toward the lunch break and the impromptu show museum that had been set up in a cargo bay that had yet to see a crate stacked within it. Duggan, Jones, and Todd pulled Stewart aside as the room cleared. "Can we talk about Latter-day's call?" Todd asked. When Stewart nodded, Todd whipped out a scanner as Duggan hit the drone switch and made their meeting private. Once the scanner blinked green, Jones spoke first. "We love the idea if we can write it in," she said, "but there isn't any mention of it in the story notes from Scott's agent." "It's new," Stewart said, "as of this morning." He looked from face to face to face. "I don't think it's part of the story, but I wouldn't put anything past him." Duggan's brow furrowed. "And you're sure you want to take the meeting, even knowing it could be a trap?" In the years since going rogue, Scott had prided himself on catching them off guard. Destroying the Pence B was a fine opening act that had surprised them all. Since then, he'd kidnapped dignitaries between seasons that he forced to be written in, stolen ships he should have never known about to add to his growing fleet, and turned the tables on a half-dozen traps that Stewart and the Space Force had set to bring their wayward son to justice. But this one, Stewart wasn't sure what to make of it. Maybe it was his own inner landscape thrown by the dream and by the sudden opportunity to see Scott again. "I am sure I want the meeting," Stewart finally said. He left the rest on set. Todd nodded. "Jones will cook up some ideas and see if they bite." He looked at Duggan. "Could the Force use this for a trap of its own?" Duggan nodded. "We could, but we're open-minded. Let's see what the writers come up with. We're eager to move beyond this story arc and get out into the galaxy next year. Stewart and Scott have had decades on the net, and it's time for an eye toward expansion." He smiled. "We're eager to expand our partnership with the studio and with Colonial Way, Inc. as we get humanity and America properly positioned in the cosmos." He clapped Stewart on the back. "I'm sure you're ready for quieter days." Stewart wasn't sure, but didn't need to answer. Jones filled in the silence instead. "So," she said, "what would you say to him after all these years, all this conflict?" "I'm sorry?" "What would you say?" she asked again. Stewart looked away. "I'd say I'm sorry," he said. Duggan looked uncomfortable, and Stewart knew why. But the drone flies had been down long enough for the chaplain to edge back into the room, and that grim man's raised eyebrow told Stewart that the conversation was over for now. After that, it was lunch, and then a quick tour of the bridge where they activated his command codes for the new ship, and Jones and the others led the big reveal that he would be taking the vessel out with Stone for that maiden voyage next month. Then, more talk with the writers beneath that sky map, followed by more food and apple cider dressed up as whiskey as a lifetime washed over him and around him. And through it all, Stewart found himself settling on the truth of the moment. He had amends to make and the opportunity to make them. And he did want to see his old friend, his fiercest foe, again, from some point of view other than the command screen of a pursuing starship before his time was done. This is a conversation no one thinks will ever be heard, and Stewart's voice is shaking with rage. "How far back, Duggan?" Duggan stammers. He and Todd monitor the room for flies and other unwelcome bugs. Todd intervenes. "They briefed us on the prototype drone footage when we took over the show." Stewart balks. "So the kid hasn't been lost? You've known exactly where he was, and you've been amassing content for a new venture? His fist comes down on his desk. We could have adjusted our plans and launched 5 years sooner, maybe 8, and rescued him from those, the word sounds ugly when he spits it out, those savages, given him a chance at a normal life. Duggan's voice is firm. Those so-called savages revolutionized the labor market after the shortages and the new revival downsizing. And the resources we're pulling from Venus have improved the human condition in ways never imagined when this space force was first conceived by the Orange Prophet and his divine commander Pence. And, Todd says, the story is a story of hope and human conquest. Jackson Scott, a toddler raised by apes on Venus as one of their own, a learning curve like no human child has ever faced, with his own recollections woven in, easily shot while he continues his work and training with you aboard the Pence. Royalties and bonuses from this, along with his family's engine and planetary stake in Venus, will set him up for life and give him a platform to tell his story. Between your mentorship and his wealth, he could have an extraordinary life on the heels of so much hardship. But it's clear from Stuart's voice that he isn't buying. He needs family and friends more than anything, people he can trust. He pauses. You've been lying about this to him and to me. I can't go along with it. My mentorship won't mean shit to him otherwise. Duggan and Todd are quiet. When Duggan speaks, his voice has a new quality to it, an edge he normally lacks. We need you to go along with it, Mac. Encourage him to play along as well. It's for his own good. I don't see how or why, Todd interrupts. Commander Duggan has asked me to upload a file to your private cortical server that will show you why helping us will be so good for your career. There is more silence as Stuart views something behind the privacy of his left eye. I see, he says. The veiled threat of missing footage from episode 8 isn't picked up by the single bug recording their words. And Scott doesn't receive the leaked recording until the ratings begin slipping at the opening of season 5. The rest is Holovision history. This bit of its origin story tucked away safely from the masses, and acting Ensign Jackson Scott for their own good. The evening was just getting started, and Stuart was just feeling finished when Stone's XO interrupted with a quiet word between the captain and Duggan. Duggan's brow spoke 30 seconds before he did. I'm afraid we're going to have to cut tonight's festivities short. We have a security breach at the Titan shipyards. Stone raised his eyebrow. Should I recall the crew and spin up the engines? Duggan shook his head. No, we need to keep Dee on task with tomorrow's system tour, and the chaplaincy needs her emptied tonight for pre-launch security. He looked at Stuart. Did they tell you yet that you'll be doing the honors? Stuart shook his head. No, but I wondered when you had my codes transferred. Todd and Jones, both drunk and looking likely to fall into bed together again soon, joined them. Party over already? Afraid so, Duggan said. But everything should be fine for tomorrow. He nodded to Stuart. See you in the morning, Mac. Then Stone turned Stuart over to the XO, and they set out for the shuttle bay. The chaplain was dismissing the lieutenant who had flown Stuart with a salute as they entered. He looked up and smiled. Stuart had heard the expression, and his blood went cold. This was the first time he'd ever felt it. Thank you, Commander, the chaplain said. I'll fly Admiral Stuart home tonight. Then his smile widened, and the temperature in Stuart's stomach dropped even colder. There were some items I wished to discuss with you, Admiral. This lets us kill 2 birds with 1 stone, as they say. Rule 1 of the Academy was when it came to the U.S. chaplaincy, you just said yes. Happy to oblige, Padre, he said. The shuttle is a more private environment. The chaplain gestured to the open hatch. Agreed, Stuart said, pausing. I'm afraid I'm not remembering your name. I'm afraid, the chaplain said. I've not given it. There was no way out of this box, Stuart saw, but to go in. He nodded, then climbed into the shuttle's main passenger cabin. The chaplain followed, then closed the hatch and drew a drone disabler out to kill the fog of drone flies that followed. They are keeping it undocumented, or at least letting him think as much. How can I help you? I want to know if you recognize this. The chaplain drew a wad of blue cloth from beneath his robes and tossed it to Stuart. He nearly dropped it as he opened the shirt. Episode 8. The chaplain took another step forward. Do you recognize it? Stuart swallowed. I do. Anything to say? He stared straight ahead, saying nothing. and the chaplain took another step forward. Tell me about your dreams, Admiral Fleetwood Mackenzie Stewart. Now he flushed and felt sick. How could they know? How? The chaplain smiled. Because I burned a cricket to Tulva and Vlom for my wandering one to follow its smoke back to me. There's nothing wrong with me, Stewart realized. It's him. You what? In the temple, the spider god and her ape lover. You burned a cricket? He looked at the insignia on the chaplain's collar. Following his eyes, the chaplain's fingers moved to the collar and began pulling at it. Yes, that's the custom when you want to find your Sholrav, your person or your people, since it doesn't connote a number, just a sense of belonging. The collar was open, but that's not what he was pulling. No, he's pulling the skin beneath it. So I burned a cricket and we dreamed about each other. The face and hair lifted away, and Jackson Scott grimmed out from beneath it. Before Stewart could close his mouth, Scott had kissed it, hard and dry. Hi, he said. My name's Jack. I'm an alcoholic. It's been 78 days since my last drink. Hi, Jack, Stewart said, then surprised himself by kissing his arch nemesis back. I'm Mac. It's been, but just then he couldn't remember how long it had been. Let's talk, Scott said, pointing to the chairs. I've got a lot to go over, but first things first. Have you decided what you're doing next? Stewart sat, mouth open and still stunned. What I'm doing next? Scott reached for a battered satchel that Stewart recognized. It had been Angus Scott's, recovered from the crash site. From it, he pulled out a sheaf of papers. I have a proposal for you. Stewart looked at the papers, looked at them, or took the papers, looked at them, and then looked up. Is this a trick? It was a prenuptial agreement and marriage contract, or at least that's what the bold all-cap letters declared across the old-fashioned paper cover page. He saw terms covering non-disclosure, film rights, dissolution, and even expansion by amendment. No, not a trick. A proposal. Marry me, Mac. It's all legit under Planet 10 law. But read it anyway. It's a big contract. Remember the Detweller twins? They're in it too. But you can decide what your marriage to them looks like. He paused. Unless you have other plans after retirement. No plans. Stewart let the papers drop into his lap after perusing the list of standard and non-standard clauses. A lifetime behind the helm, giving orders with clarity and purpose, and now he floundered in weather beyond his ken. I'm a bit lost here, Jack. Scott leaned forward. I know it's a lot, and I'm sorry it's compressed into such a cramped moment after too many years, but hear me out and then decide. If you say no, I'll drop you at home, and we'll meet again later in the season. He waited, held out a hand. Deal? They shook. Deal. Then they settled into their chairs. First, Scott said, I want to tell you I'm sorry. Stewart looked up. You're sorry? No, Jack, I'm sorry. I helped them exploit your childhood. Yeah, Jack said, but you did it because of the shirt, because of episode 8 and episode 7. Stewart blushed. I think I was drinking to cover it up. I know I didn't want to see it. We're all covering something, Jack said. Anyway, I felt betrayed, but eventually I found out the truth. Enough money buys plenty of eyes and ears. His eyes softened. And we grew up in different cultures. There is no room for the spider ape cult of savage Venus in the revised United States and her colonies. See you as shackles of shame I never could understand, not growing up where I did. Still, young men and ship's captains, both old men now, Scott said. Also, the subject of great speculation and vast amounts of fan fiction spanning decades in the underground porn market. Stewart had avoided knowing about such things and pointed them back on course. Still, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I waited so long to let you know I knew and that I understood. His face softened. All these years, Mac, I've not been at war with you, just them. Now something happened to Stewart that he couldn't fathom, and he was grateful for the absence of cameras. He felt a tear coming on and took in a breath to squeeze off more. And now you want to spend the rest of your life with me? Scott shrugged. You're the first human I remember meeting. You're still my favorite, and I've met quite a few. I can't think of a better person to help me clean up the mess than the fellow that helped make it in the first place. He felt his brow furrowing. What do you mean? We're not digging deep enough in our fearless moral inventory, Mac. If we think we are the ones we hurt the most, Can you see the trail of tears our Space Force has left across every non-human it's encountered? And now they're talking about us using my family's engine to go even further out? His eyes were bright with anger. They laud me for providing a home to the system's refugees and misfits. But what have I done with all my fame and fortune to make the system a better home for everyone in it? I've made it worse. We both have, Mac, by feeding a voracious monster. I want us to make things right. Me and you and whoever else will join us. His face was earnest in the dim light. There are better dreams than these that we've dreamed so far. What are you proposing, Jack, besides marriage? Liberation, Scott cried out, and education. He jumped to his feet with a flourish and moved to the pilot's chair to fire up the engine and punch in coordinates. I think that's enough for now until you decide, but the clock is ticking. About 3 minutes, I'd say, before our window closes. He looked over the papers again. Can I have my attorney look this over? He was asking the right questions, but Stewart already knew his answer and already knew that no Terran attorney was going to sign off on the kind of documents Stewart now held before him. Okay, he finally said as the shuttle cleared the bay. I do. He signed the forms, and Scott took them from him, tucking them in the satchel as he drew its strap over his shoulder. They kissed again. Now, hold me, Scott said, as he strapped a large, clumsy watch onto his wrist and spun a dial. A wave of nausea and the sudden urge to urinate overwhelmed Stewart, and then, with a flash of light, the shuttle fell away, and he collapsed heavily on top of Scott in a dark, warm place. Scott squeezed his shoulder as he gasped for air. First matter transmission experiences are a bit discombobulating. Stewart was barely following. Matter transmission? What in the hell was he talking about? They weren't on the shuttle, but he had lost all sense of time after feeling twisted inside out and scattered. Where are we? Back on the Pence D. And the shuttle? On its way to your place to deliver you safe and sound, or a close approximation of you. Stewart adjusted himself. Is this a bed? Get some sleep, Scott said. Busy day. Stewart felt the briefest sting in his neck. Then the fog rolled in to take him. He flies the jungle now toward better dreams, the leaves and wind slapping at his bare skin, vine after vine pulling him along behind his friend, his lover, his spouse, his one-time foe. Scott moves with ease, and Stewart is clumsy in his wake, but learns quickly. Around them, the apes fly too, more joining each day as the cause grows. Not just the apes, but the ice lemurs, and below, in lagoons that made no sense on Venus outside of a dream, the Neptunian tentacled tadpoles leap the waves, their tiny opposable thumbs uplifted in solidarity, and slowly some of the humans join, slower, clumsier, pink and brown, male and female, and other than, and all the dazzling points of beauty in between, stripping off the falseness of their uniforms, tangling their fists into the living vines of truth and pulling themselves forward. They move in one direction, away from darkness and toward a rising light, and there is music and moaning and, wake up, my love, Jackson Scott said. I've got your wedding gift. Time for you to give me mine. Stewart was awake in far more ways than he expected to be, and wondered what kind of stimulants had been administered to him. He was in a lavishly decorated room, laying fully uniformed in a red heart-shaped bed. Scott grinned at the look on his face. Still on the D. I had this Polly Pan play bedroom set ordered as a bit of a surprise for Stone, but I think it'll do us nicely. He winked. I'm glad you said yes. Scott was standing now in his own rainbow-colored uniform. You'll recall the security breach at Titan Shipyards? Stewart nodded. The C. I had her picked up for you last night. I think Duggan's apoplectic about it. We'll rendezvous with her tomorrow, and you can take command. Slowly, it was all dawning on him. The vines had been a dream, but everything before it had really happened. My wedding gift, he said. He stood and went to the nightstand, running his finger over the feather duster and writing crop holstered there. Scott smiled. And you have a gift for me? Computer, Stewart said, returning the smile as the voice activation chimed. Recognize Stewart, Fleetwood Mackenzie, Admiral, United States Space Force. Transfer command authorization to the following voice print. He paused. Scott, Jackson Remuel Wagner, Scott said. Mark, Stewart said. Authorization transferred, the computer confirmed. Excellent, Scott said. Now, let's have breakfast, steal a starship, and get to work making amends to the solar system. Stealing the Pence D was the easiest last day in the Force, that Stewart could have imagined. And when they were safely pointed toward Planet 10, easily outrunning the few craft not already in pursuit of the Pent Sea, they returned to their quarters. So what's next? Stewart asked his unexpected husband. Liberation and education, Scott replied. Let's show them what's coming their way. He thumbed a button and the lights went blue and dim. Soft music whooped to light as the bed began to rotate and the drone flies filled the room. There was something simple and beautiful in Scott's eyes, and Stewart gave himself over to it. Yes, they need to see this, Stewart thought, surprised at himself yet again. Oh, Captain, my Captain, he whispered as he reached for his long-lost friend and a future he'd never imagined possible. Oh, Captain, my Captain, Scott whispered back as they sank into the waiting satin sheets and the drone flies danced above.
Now, is there anybody who has a question for Ken on this story? Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah. The place you ask it is you go into the chat. And, well, we have no questions, Ken. You
That's
have
okay.
the honor of being first. And I won't ask you your motivation. Oh, just a second. What is, what the hell? Lou?
It's been a while.
Lou!
How are you?
It's good to see your face.
Good to see you too. I didn't even see the invite till just now. I'm like, wait a minute.
Well, hello, Lou.
How are you?
I'm good.
You missed hearing the whole story?
I missed everything. I was checking my email and there it was.
Well, I tell you, you can go watch it on YouTube.
Okay.
Ken, tell him what you did.
Well, I just I'd written a story for Bob's anthology, Space Force, a story called Better Dreams Than These about huge part of the story is my love of Star Trek, my love of Edgar Rice Burroughs, my past background as an ex-GOP, ex-preacher, ex-bigot, so this kind of this set me up to tell a different kind of story. It's the first story I've ever written that ends with the making of a gay porno in space.
That's awesome.
And so that was when I was, went out looking for the, so I know that people find all these different ways. I know that the easiest way to find a story is to just sit down and get quiet and plug back into life. And so walking in nature, getting under a tree, hanging out near a spider's web, any of those things, and I'll find my story. So it was Valentine's Day of 2020 that I went for a hike here. I don't remember what trail it was. I think it was University Falls maybe, or it might've been Soapwood Lake. But anyway, I went wandering the forest and I knew Bob had asked me for a story and I knew when I went into the forest, I would find my story. And sure enough, this whole thing landed in my head that I would, that I was going to tell this story about this aging alcoholic, hollow vision, reality TV starship captain in the Space Force, and him coming to grips with the life he's lived and the fact that he's helped do a lot of harm with his beliefs. And so this gave me a chance to tell that story. And I don't tell as many stories as I used to. I don't find myself consumed with the need to write all the time like I used to. So when I do get a story, it's important for me to grab it. And when somebody like Bob says, "Hey, Ken, would you give me a story?" This is my favorite way to write, is to have an editor ask for something that they want kind of fit their, the market that they have in mind. So.
I had an opportunity to write something for Bob for the Scott's Planet Antho, and that was a lot of fun because I wanted to get in his head and figure out, what is it that you're missing? And he told me what he was missing. He was missing a
Well,
tinker.
how pleasant that you bring that up, Lou. This is a weekly effort we're doing here, where now we knew that Ken's story was long.
Grr.
How long did it run?
A little under an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And about 50 minutes.
6,000 words.
Thereabouts, probably six or seven. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't have my manuscript. Usually I'm reading from the collection instead of from my manuscript, so I don't have my word count.
That's
I
okay.
had to take a loan out to pay him. I just remembered that.
Well,
no, it's fun. But Space Force had some incredible stories in it. Now, Lou, you were not in Space Force, I don't believe.
Nope.
But you were in Scott's Planet.
Yes.
How would you like to read your Scott's Planet next week?
I'll be in Portugal for 2 weeks, starting tomorrow. But I would love to read that. I would love to read that story. I had a lot of fun writing, and I really love the characters. I was hoping there'd be a lot of clamor for more, but I don't know. We haven't spoken in a while, so I don't know how it did. I don't know how Scott's Planet did.
I haven't. Sometimes I don't always go get all carried away following up a book. Now, because after when I did our very first book, the one that you told me I didn't pay enough to get you to be in.
Me?
Yes, Lou.
Ken.
He, but it was our first book, and we were only paying 2 cents a word.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I
And
did.
but it. My daughter called me the day after we published it and said, you're number one in anthologies. And I was like, oh, okay. And I found myself checking 6 times a day to see how we were doing. And then after I did that, I realized that was more exhausting than working on a book. And,
it's like watching a penny stock that you invest in, see if it goes up 0.00001 penny more, and thereby doubling your investment.
Yeah, like I bought some Shell one time, and but the kicker of it is I just don't do that anymore, and so I couldn't always tell you how well a book did. I know if that when I get a check in, I have to go in and send money to the ACOU, and I know that only 6 of our books have earned out, and those were all bestsellers at some point in the world. And that I love doing them, and it's fun. And that our next book is hopefully coming out right around the 4th of July. It's called An American Storm or American Storm. Jeff Sturgeon did the cover for us, and it is right at 95,000 words. And we are fortunate enough that we've done well enough. We're paying 10 cents a word for it. The calls are closed, but we've got Brenda Cooper is in it.
Oh, she's great.
Oh, yes, she is really, truly great. Karen Anderson is helping us edit it. I got David Gerald is got me a story, Lou, as does Adam Troy Castro. And Adam Troy's story just blew me away when I read it. So I'm proud of the quality of the book and the stories that we've read. I mean, there are stories in here that have brought this old sailor to tears.
Yes.
That are just, they're phenomenal. And I might even, as we get closer and get into promo, I may have a couple of them get read. But we've got an ample collection. So, what are you doing? Why would you go leave Florida to go to Portugal?
Interestingly enough, we have a friend who is a trans woman, and she no longer feels safe to be in the United States. And she moved out to be near us in Colorado, and we have since moved from Colorado to Florida. And because we're not there anymore, we are a strong moral support and decent, good friends with her. And she no longer feels safe to live in the United States. So she said, "I'm going to go look at Porto, and we're going to go to Lisbon. Is there any way that you guys could join me for moral support?" And so we said yes, and that's what we're
So
doing.
you're moving, or you're
We're going to see what she sees. We're going to hold her hand, and we're going to ask the tough questions of the expats that are there to see what it's like. I am still open to leaving the United States myself. I've been to Belize 3 times in the last year. I don't
yeah,
like.
I've heard about some of your thoughts there. I
Yep.
mean, I can't imagine why you'd leave Florida. I mean, it's one of the most liberal, happy
Your
states
face.
to ever been. I mean, Jim Wright is from Florida,
Yeah, yeah. His blueness has
and
leaked throughout the whole state and changed it entirely blue.
and you've got the redistricting to further enhance the liberties of everybody.
Right, right. I am in Colorado, which is a purple state that has voted blue. When I was there, I was an independent, and I was an independent for a very long time. So moving to Florida, my knee-jerk reaction was to become an independent. In Colorado, for the primaries, if you're an independent, you get the Republican and the Democratic ballot. You can only return one, but you get them both because as an independent, they still want your voice involved with the primary. In Florida, if you aren't a member of either the Democratic or the Republican Party, and if you register independent, which I did, you get no ballot. You have no say. Your voice is not wanted. So I registered as a,
Republican.
yes, I did. I registered as a Republican. So I can, at the primary, vote for the least MAGA Republican on the ballot. And if there are enough other folks that tend to lean blue, tend to lean left, that do the same exact thing because otherwise there's no voice. And what good would a Democratic ballot do in this state? It would do no good at all.
I
But if I
don't
can,
know. I think our whole primary system is designed to keep. We need to nationally adopt what the ranked
ranked
choice
choice,
voting.
I agree. I agree.
That's the only way we're ever going to escape from the nightmarish hell we're in.
Yep.
But we did this whole show this morning where we even talked about the fact that God bless them, they delayed the election uh, so that they could change the voting boundaries and get rid of the only two black majority districts in the state.
Right.
Because, mind you, they didn't want to have any districts that were racially motivated as to the racial makeup, unless, of course, it was motivation to make the racial makeup white.
Right.
And that is just a phenomenally pissed me off stuff. Or like Memphis, where they had a very compact district in a city that is 63% African American, and they cracked it open, took a third of it, put it in majority white districts, so that they could guarantee there wouldn't be any more black representation coming out of Tennessee.
I saw that.
Yeah. Anyway, you guys didn't. We're here to be, but if anybody here is wondering what BQ Press publishes,
Hmm.
I'm the publisher, and I publish stories that are consistent with my beliefs. And so you've heard now my beliefs. You've heard one of our star writers read, And so tune in next week, and we're going to have, I don't know who yet, but it's going to be awesome.
It's
And
always awesome.
now that said, I'm going to end